So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So, this is a talk that I will be giving at a conference on Islamic economics in Turkey this Sunday. But there I will only be talking for 20 minutes, and it's much longer. So, I'm just doing some preparation and practice for that same lecture. So, we start. So, basically, this talk is about Islamic economics, and starts by discussing two previous papers. One is called Reviving the Promise of Islamic Economics. So, this paper has been translated into Turkish also. Basically, the main points of this paper are that Islamic economics started with basically in early 20th century, almost 90% of the Islamic world was under colonial rule of some sort or the other. So, after World War I, many places started getting liberated. So, there was this question of what will the economic system of the newly freed Islamic countries be. So, that was when Islamic economics came into being. That at that time the dominant paradigms were capitalism and communism, and the first generation of Islamic economic theorists said that there is an Islamic economic system which is very different from capitalism and very different from communism, and it will provide justice and social welfare and equity, and sort of it will be good for all. So the first generation was systems level debate for various reasons. So this you can say is from 1950 to 1975, although it starts before then, but roughly end of World War II too. So in that quarter century, actually there was no revolutions that took place. So basically the systems in the colonies did not change from the pre-liberation system. So the economic system was the same, and it did not seem like, there was some effort made to launch Islamic revolutions, but throughout the world these efforts failed. Just like our Islamic Jamaat in Pakistan tried to launch a revolution and failed. So all over the world, various types of Islamic Jamaats with same ideas tried to launch Islamic revolution and failed. So the second generation of Islamic economics started in 1975-76. There was a big conference in Mecca, which was called the first conference of international Islamic economics. And at that point, people decided that no revolution is coming, so why not we start with existing system and try to modify it to make it Islamic. So instead of a revolution, they said let's start from what we have and evolutionarily change it into an Islamic system. So basically the second generation said that okay, let me take capitalism as given, also capitalist economic theory as given, and try to see how we can modify it to make it Islamic. So this was a serious problem, because actually the spirit of capitalism and spirit of Islam is not matched at all. It's like trying to mix fire and water. And so basically that's why for a quarter of a century Islamic economics was lost and trapped in a darkness. There was nothing of interest or importance came out of it, because basically what they were trying to do was impossible. To take a bank and to make it Islamic, it's like, and you basically take interest and make it Islamic. So you can't do that because it's impossible. Islam has an entirely different set of ideas. You take selfishness, a system which is based on selfishness and greed and competition, and you want to make it Islamic. The Islamic system is based on generosity and cooperation. So how can you do that? You can't. So what the second generation did was, most often what they were trying to do was something very impossible. Basically they were taking capitalist economic ideas and they were trying to find Quranic justifications for this. So you take some instrument like you take some idea like utility maximization, and you say, which is completely ridiculous, in the sense that basically utility maximization is about fulfilling your pleasures in this world, and Islam is not about that. Or you take some instrument like the bond, which is completely haram, and then you try to find an Islamic equivalent for that. So this is not. This is why the second generation methodology failed, although still it is the dominant one. Now, somewhere around after the second millennium, many people realized that this is not working, and so there is third generation which is trying to go back to the Islamic roots from the Quran and Hadith, rejecting the Western capitalist system and the Western capitalist theories, and trying to build genuine alternatives. So basically, third generation is defined by saying that the foundation should be built in Quran and Hadith. Now you see, the second generation foundation is built on Samuelson, but you can make changes in the branches according to the Islamic ideas. But in third generation, our foundation must be built on Quran and Hadith, and we can make modifications if we think that there is something in the West that is useful. We can adopt it, but we cannot use that as the root and foundation. So what is the definition? So we start with definition, because the second generation said, okay, we take the definition of scarcity, and since that's the Western definition, and then we try to fit some Islamic idea onto it. Now actually the first generation said that there is no scarcity, because in the Quran Allah Ta'ala says that Fadlullah al-Wasi'a, that Allah Ta'ala's fazl, bounty, is very big, so how can there be scarcity? So the second generation said, no, that's not correct. I mean, when the West says that scarcity, then scarcity must be. So now we reinterpret the Quran to make sure that we find scarcity in it. So rejecting that, and we come back to basically, okay, forget about Western economics. What does Islam tell us about economics? So if we start from zero and think about what the Quran is telling us, then we see that the Quran has a lot of ahkam, a lot of commandments. Allah Ta'ala says you should pay zakat, you should take your excess wealth and give it to others, and many things about money matters. In fact, one of the questions on the Day of Judgment will be that how did you earn your money and how did you spend it? So the ways of earning, they should be halal. The ways of spending, they should be on good things. You are not allowed to spend on bad things. How you keep your wealth, that is also a trust from Allah, so amana. So that's also, so everything from earning, using, and then spending, all of these three things, there are ahkam, there are commandments. So basically, then if we want to think about what Islamic economics is, then it has to be that how do we implement the orders of Allah in with respect to economics. And now the orders are at three different levels. There is the micro level, which is addressed to every individual. I have to pay zakat on my property, I have to help others, I have to feed the hungry, and so many things that I need to do. Spend excess wealth correctly, don't do israf, tabzir, many other commandments. So this is then I would say that this is microeconomics of Islam, that what are the orders of Allah with respect to my personal life. Then there is an intermediate level which is very important, which we will call mesoeconomics, because there is no counterpart in modern economic theories. So intermediate level has to do with community. So it has to do with my family, my neighborhood. That's our social life, which is our friends, our kinfolk, our community. So this is the intermediate level, which is very important. Actually, this level is missing from economics, because of economics theory has this idea that it is methodologically individualistic. So it says that if we just look at individuals and then we just add up all of the individual behavior, we can get to the group behavior. This idea is wrong, because complexity theory, it's interactions between groups that lead to a lot of important behaviors. So looking at individuals in isolation, you cannot understand the interactions. So the community is very important unit in Islam, and there are communities built of many different kinds of communities, your family, neighborhood, etc. So that's mesoeconomics, which doesn't exist in Western economics, but there are lots of ahkam dealing with how to deal with your family, with your neighbors, next of kin, travelers, needy, etc. All of these are at the community level. Then finally there is the macroeconomics. Now in the macroeconomics, the Islam deals with the ummah as a whole. It doesn't deal with nations. And in fact, thinking about nations is actually an obstacle to building the ummah. So this is already, you see, conventional macroeconomics has the idea of nation built into it. So a nation should strive for its own welfare, and they can work against the welfare of others, try to maximize their welfare at the expense of others, trade wars, etc. So in Islam we can't do that, because we cannot think of the benefit of one nation against another nation. This is explicitly forbidden. We have to think of ummah as a whole and also humanity as a whole, and work for the welfare of all. So immediately the conception of economics changes when we look at the ummah level. So whereas conventional neoclassical economics is based on the idea that everyone will behave selfishly, and that the competition between people will lead to efficiency, competition between firms, Islam is based on the idea that people should behave generously, and the welfare of humanity will be achieved by cooperation, not by competition. So basically it's diametrically opposed. On the one hand you have generosity and competition, on the other selfishness and competition. On the other hand you have generosity and cooperation. So this is why second generation failed, because you can't mix these two. Okay, let's try to form a system in which you have all four of these things. Well, it doesn't work like that. I mean, you have to have. So this paper which I am presenting starts by saying that, okay, the first thing we have to do is to recognize that conventional economic theory is actually a deception. It is a fraud. See, economic theory started as a branch of moral philosophy. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher. And what is important to understand is that economics is still a branch of moral philosophy. Although it claims to be a positive subject, it is not. Every single piece of economics we do is purely normative. It describes how rational people should behave. It doesn't describe actual behavior. It describes a perfect system, a system of perfect competition, which does not exist in this real world. So it says that you should strive to be perfect. It doesn't say that this is what the reality. So a positive system is one in which you describe what you see and don't make any judgment about it. But here economists don't do that. Economists say that there is an ideal form of behavior which is rational. If you don't behave like that, you're stupid. And there is an ideal form of society which is perfect competition. And if something is not perfect, we have don't have free markets, then we should try to change that thing and we should try to make it perfect. So all of this is normative. Now the thing is that the normative is presented as being positive. So this is the main deception. Something which is an element of moral philosophy, this is how people should behave, is presented as a positive thing. This is how people do behave. So that's the first deception, and there are many others. Alright, so I'm going to go through 7 different concepts which are all deceptive in different ways. Actually, it's amazing that how the economists have managed to fool so many people over such a large... and the thing is that the deception is so obvious. It's basically reminds me of the story of Musa alayhi salam in the court of Fir'aun. These magicians, they took sticks and ropes and they made the whole people believe that it was snakes, and everybody was scared. So exactly like that, the economists have succeeded in creating mass hallucination. Everybody believes in these the thing is something else, and they make it appear to be something else, and they have successfully deceived huge numbers of people. So we are going to go through these 7 concepts, all of which are extremely deceptive. One important thing about this deception is that why is this deception is carried out? You see, you have to look beyond. Okay, you can see the trick, but why are people doing this trick? Well, the Pharaoh was doing it to protect his power, because which he felt that it was threatened by Musa. So exactly like this, the top 1% of the population, 1% is just a metaphor, actually it's only about 50 people or so. They are running the world. 50 people have more than half of the world on this planet, half of the wealth of this planet. So they are too few to control the world by force. So instead of force, they use something which they use deception. So economic theory is part of this magic which is used to control the world. So now economic theory has, which I will call ET1%. It's the economic theory of the 1%. And it has to have, it has a very, to understand what ET1% is, you have to think very carefully that this is a theory which benefits the 1%, but it must have the appearance of being equitable and benefiting everybody, because it is needed to buy the cooperation of the bottom 90%. So it has to have the appearance of helping everybody while only helping the rich. So this is not easy to achieve. Not every theory will do that. So it has to be done very carefully. So we are going to show how all of these theories that we discuss have this property, that they are part of ET1%. And now the task of the Islamic economist is to construct ET90%, which is the theory which will protect the interests of the bottom 90%. So, Pareto optimality. So now we want to show that this theory is part of ET1%. So first of all, we have to show that it should appeal to everybody. So basically, what does Pareto optimality say? It says that if you give more to everybody, then the society is better off. So who can object to that? This seems to be very fair and equitable and just. Give more things to everybody and the whole society will be made better off. Nobody will object to that. But what is hidden inside this apparently just and fair and equitable and egalitarian. You see, it's not talking about the rich at all. It's saying that you can give more to the poor. But Martin Feldman says, okay, so what's hidden inside this is that, alright, so apparently the principle is equal, but if you just give, if the rich people double their money and the poor people, nothing happens to them, this is a Pareto improvement. And Martin Feldman actually explicitly argues that this is what we are going to talk about, that how giving more money to the rich, even though it increases inequality, is good for the society because of the Pareto principle. Everybody has more. So now, when some people question this, then people add the trickle-down theory too, that okay, so yes, maybe inequality increases, but as long as there is more wealth in the society, eventually it will get to the poor. So that's one implication. There is a philosopher in Persia at one point, and he said, there should be no private property. All property is common. And so this was seemed like it was a very appealing principle. The king does not own his own palace. It belongs to everybody. So again, this seems like a very egalitarian, socialist, communist kind of philosophy which would help everybody. But what happened as a result was that the rich people would go and grab the material from the poor because they have the power. The poor people could not go and take over the palace of the king because he had his guards. So what seems like a very egalitarian principle is actually turns out to be a very wealthy friendly principle which actually hurts the poor. So all of this is like that. So one of the things that increasing inequality is good according to Pareto. The second thing is that if somebody says, these poor people are hungry, let's take some wealth from the rich and give it to the poor, that is blocked by the Pareto principle. It says, no, you can't take anything away from anybody because once you reduce their wealth, then you don't have Pareto improvement. So feeding the poor is not good for society. This is again contrary to Islam, because if you have to take money from the wealthy, so consider to understand this better, consider an alternative principle. Let's suppose that we will consider not the wealth, we consider just the consumption stream of people. How much they can eat, how much they can dress, what education and what services they have. We don't consider the wealth sitting in their bank accounts as part of their consumption stream. So suppose we introduce the idea that if a redistribution improves the consumption of everybody, actual consumption, and does not reduce the consumption of anybody, then it is a Pareto improvement. Seems very sensible. So what would happen? These multi-billionaires, we can take their money away and give it to the poor and feed the hungry. So that is a very sensible principle, but this is not the Pareto optimality principle. Even the money sitting in the banks you cannot touch according to the Pareto principle. So if we say that, let's allow those interventions in which somebody who is dying gets medicine from somebody whose wealth is so in excess that he will never miss it. So even that is not allowed by the Pareto principle. So Pareto principle appears very nice, neutral, objective, but it is actually very strongly biased towards the wealthy. It prioritizes property rights over basic needs. This is the key. The Pareto principle appears to be an objective scientific, and that's what economists claim, but it is actually a normative principle, and the normative principle says that property rights are extremely important and they take precedence over everything. They take precedence over the right of the hungry to eat. So this is exactly contrary to Islam. So if one person has all the money, everybody else is hungry, Pareto principle says that's fine. You cannot touch this. You cannot take money from the rich person and give it to the poor. But Islam says that if everybody is hungry, then even if the person has only a little bit extra, you can take away from him and you can equally distribute to all. So liberals who support this, they say that the rich man has the right to feed crumbs to his dog from his table and let the starving man starve, because his property is his and he can do with it what he wants. Nobody else can say anything about how he wants to spend his property. The Quran also says very clearly that if we give wealth to some people, then they become corrupt and they spread corruption in the land. And this is exactly what happens when people have wealth and power. Then they use it, they abuse it to oppress and exploit others. And so this is again against the Pareto principle, because according to Pareto, you give more to everybody, you make everybody better off, not just him. The society is made better off. But Quran says no. If you give extra wealth to some people, they will spread corruption in the land, and so you will not make them better off. You will not make society better off. So now, unfortunately, Muslims, second generation Muslims, were deceived by the West, and they said that no, if the West says Pareto, then we must accept Pareto. So even though it's contrary to the Quran. Invisible hand. Again, this is one of the basic principles of economics. Mankiw starts with this discussion of invisible hand. Keynes said about this that it is the astonishing belief that the nastiest motives of the nastiest men somehow or the other create good results for everybody. This is a ridiculous belief, but this is what economists teaches. That let everybody act selfishly and the good for the society will be produced. Now Islam says this is wrong. It says innamal a'mal bin niyat. Even if somehow good thing is produced, if the niyat is wrong, then the action is wrong and the effect will be wrong. Now the fact is that this is just a false principle. This is another deception. This is a lie which somehow, and this is really astonishing, the power of the magicians of the court of Pharaoh, how they can make people believe amazingly stupid things. So the Great Depression was caused by greed. People wanted to make money by deceiving others. The same thing happened in the global financial crisis. It was caused by people, basically they devised methods in which basically what happened was that you could originally, you see, before the mortgage market was organized so that if the bank sells a mortgage to you, then they have to recover the money from you. So the banks were very careful who they gave the money to. Now, the economists came up with this bright idea that you can take a mortgage is a stream of earnings, and you can sell it in the market. So once these sales started and they became popular, then what happened was that the banks just said, okay, I have sell a mortgage for $100,000. The man has to pay $1,000 every month for however many months it takes to pay this off. And so now I have a stream of earnings in this mortgage. And then I can sell it to anybody. So now the bank has no incentive to check whether the person whom I am giving the mortgage to, is he a sound person? Can he pay back? And in fact, banks started going out into the streets and picking any person, say, come in and get a mortgage for us. I will buy any house you like, any amount of income. We won't check your income. We won't check anything. You just make the first payment. That's all. So if you have a $100,000 house, you put $1,000 down and you can buy a $100,000 house. Now what happened as a result was that these fraud mortgages were generated. Banks knew that this man cannot pay more than 2-3 months. That's all his capacity. And now the thing is that why would person and these people got wiped out. The thing is that because mortgages started being sold like crazy, everybody started buying, the price of houses started rising, and so people said, okay, even if I don't have money to pay, it doesn't matter. As long as I can hold this for 1 year, the price of the house will double and I will sell it back and I'll get a huge profit. So let me buy even though I can't really finance this in the long run, because I will make the money on the increasing prices. So this created an artificial boom which eventually collapsed. So this was caused by greed, because everybody knew what's happening. It's fraud and greed. The bank said, okay, as long as I can get my money and I can get my mortgage and I sell it, then even though this product itself is a defective product, and again Islam prohibits the sale of defective products, but in the West they say, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. The person who is buying, he is supposed to check. I can sell something which is a fraud, it doesn't matter. As long as I can fool somebody, this is in my self-interest to do so. Greed says that yes, as long as I'm going to try to maximize my profit, it's your job to try to prevent me from doing so. Not my job to be honest. So, another thing is that wars are caused by greed. That basically the desire to grab the oil of Iraq led to the war, and many other wars have been caused by basically these multinational corporations. There is this General Smedley Butler who has written a book called War is a Racket, and what he says is basically that, for a while we fought that, wars appear to be about honor and dignity and national interest, etc. They're all about money. Even this, Rohingya Muslims, it's not about, it's a major land grab by the army. The army has taken thousands of acres from these Muslims. Doesn't have anything to do with Islam or Muslims. It has to do with property. So just like that, this whole global war on terrorism, it has to do with the interest of Pentagon. After the collapse of Russia, there was nobody to fight. America has a budget in military which is 10 times the size of the rest of the world put together. Nobody is big enough to fight. So American people said that let's shut down the war industry. We don't need it. So Pentagon had to find an enemy to fight. So they said, okay, let it be Islam. Islam is so big and so that we can attack it and keep attacking it for a while. There are a billion people, they won't all die very quickly. So we will be able to finance the industry. So this is what war on terror, war against Islam, Islamophobia, it has nothing to do. Nobody in the West hates Islam. Islam is Islam. It's just like any other religion there. But this has been generated because the underlying quest for profits, for money. The whole world is being destroyed because the corporations want to ruin the atmosphere, ruin the oceans, kill half of the species in the planet that existed, have been destroyed over the past century, and this is a loss which cannot be repaired just in the quest for profits. So this idea that profit maximization is good for us, this is a ridiculous idea. The invisible hand is causing a lot of damage. So the real thing is, it's not that it's not the invisible hand and how it works. The real puzzle is, why do economists can't see? It's like somebody saying that it is midnight now when the sun is shining. This is such a powerful magic. How can economists do this? How can they do it to themselves? How can they deceive themselves? Basically, the invisible hand is another device to justify the greed of the wealthy people. They allow them to do whatever they want because that will lead to good results for the society. Okay, this production function, this is another beautiful piece of deception. You see, the thing is that once you put 7 different curtains between your eyes and the sun, then it makes makes it difficult. So it's not just one little lie, that it's hundreds of different lies which have been told and which you have been made to believe, and that's what prevents you from being able to see the sun. So the production function, the major function of this is to create a false equality between capital and labor. So capital is one input to the production function, labor is one input. It seems like they are equal. Completely false. The laborer has to sell his labor, which is basically his life, in order to buy food for his family. The capitalist, he is just putting a machine in the factory. He hires the laborer. He is the boss. He has life and death power over his laborers. Basically, as somebody has said, these people are wage slaves. They are not, in the ancient times, they were slaves in the sense of everything they have to do, but they are slaves in return for the wage. The capitalist pays them so that they can survive, and in return they get to do whatever he asks them to do. But in the production function, labor gets its marginal product, capital gets its marginal product. Completely bogus theory. There is no such thing as a production function. But the thing is invented to deceive people into thinking that capitalists and laborers are somehow on par, when in fact, and basically hide the fact which Karl Marx pointed out, that the capitalists exploit labor massively. And that's what's happening today. If you look at the pay of the CEOs, before this financial deregulation started, maybe about 50 years ago, the average earning of the laborers in organization, the CEO pay was about 30 times that. Now, over the past 3 decades, it has risen to 300 times that. So now, still, people are saying, and just yesterday one of our ministers said that this is because capitalism provides those people who are productive with returns to their wealth. And that's exactly the same justification that's being given by economists like Mankiw, that if somebody is earning 300 times, it's because his productivity is 300 times. So over the past 3 decades, the CEO productivity has increased dramatically. There's no empirical evidence for this. What happened that CEOs become suddenly 10 times as productive as they were before? But this is the argument then, and the economic theory, because the production function doesn't exist, so they can argue anything they like. They can say that the fact that they are earning 300 shows that their productivity is 300, because you can't estimate a production function. In fact, the production function is estimated using this earnings data. So it's a circular argument. So there are many different critiques, and in the anti-textbook we saw some of them. Oh, this is the graph of the CEO pay, which shows that typical worker pay has remained basically flat, but and the stocks have gone up, which is the value of the company, but the CEO pay has gone up even more. Alright, so we get to the third trick, or the fourth trick. This is the fourth one. The master trick of all is the GNP per capita. This, everybody in the world, all the nations are chasing this idea. Now, again, this is part of ET 1%, because you see, you could measure wealth of the nation as a whole, and basically, you see, classical economics was about, they said that there are different groups in the society. There are the landlords, the rentiers, the capitalists, the laborers, and basically how much does each of this group get? That was the basic idea of economics. Now, what the classical said, that if we do this, then we will find what Piketty and others have found recently, that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So he says, we don't want to do that. Let's find a measure of wealth of society which treats everybody equally. So they say, instead of measuring the total wealth and then measuring how it is divided among different groups, what we do is we do this fairy tale, imaginary operation. Take all the wealth, imagine that it is distributed equally in the whole society. Everybody gets exactly the same. How much would it be? That is GNP per capita. That imaginary number. So now all of the inequality has disappeared, because GNP per capita has, before measuring the wealth, you divide it equally to everybody. We wish it was like that, then there would be no problem. Now this, everybody is taken in by this deception. Now people object that, look, this is not correct, and the people, rich people are getting more and more. So the answer to that is trickle down, which doesn't exist, doesn't happen. Recently there was some report about the millionaires regarding Trump tax cuts that look, theoretically if our wealth increases it should trickle down, but actually what happens is that when we get a tax break we'll say buy a second yacht or do something else that's going to trickle down to the poor. So as long as people keep, now actually there is an Islamic alternative. It's not that there is, Islam says that we should look out after the feeding of the poor. So suppose we were to make the target the wealth that belongs to the bottom 25% of the population, for example, because that's only, Islam doesn't say that you can have infinite amounts of wealth, and doesn't say that more and more wealth is good for you, contrary to the Pareto principle. It says that yes, those people who have needs, we should give money to them. Those people who have excess should give away their money. So excess wealth is not a measure of prosperity, but insufficient wealth is a measure of deprivation. So instead of GNP per capita, what we should do is look at how much money goes to the bottom 20%, because those are the needy people, and that should be our standard of. And if we did that, everything would change. If the minister comes out today and says, "Oh, Pakistan achieved a growth of 7%," yay, everybody will clap. But if the poor people did not change, then we will say that, look, your growth rate was 0%. What are you doing? So the criteria that is popular makes a big difference in terms of policies. What is visible, you see, GNP per capita, they say, okay, people will say, okay, the poor are not doing well. So you'll say, it's all right. Wealth is increasing. Look, GNP per capita is 6%. So it will help benefit the poor in the long run. So this is the standard argument which is widely accepted. So since this is widely accepted, people believe it. And so the only criteria. So if we change the criteria to, and actually, and Mahbubul Haq realized this, and that's why he introduced this Human Development Index. He said that, look, at least we should take into account the education and the health. So that's what the Human Development Index does, but it's a partial remedy. So here is a picture which shows the data about the trickle down. So it goes from 1959 to 2013. The solid line is GNP per capita, and the poverty rate is the dashed line. As you can see, GNP per capita has been increasing, but the poverty rate hasn't responded like that. So this just proves that there is no trickle down. This is true all over the world. So one of the things that this is maybe the fifth trick. The fifth trick is that you consider, initially the subject was called political economy, so you may have to separate the politic, which is about power, from the economy. That way you fail to understand basically that puts a barrier between your looking at the connection between money and power, and how the rich people use their money to manipulate the public opinion. So actually the knowledge that we have about the world is shaped by what the rich people want us to know. So very micro level illustration of this is the tobacco industry. They found out long time ago that tobacco causes cancer, but they made sure that they for 20 years at least, they prevented the public from learning this. Lots of people would do research and show the link, and then they would publish some other research, the tobacco industry, that showed that no, this research is not reliable. Just like they are doing with climate change today. Even though it's very solidly established, nobody who has studied the facts can doubt it. The evidence is bulletproof. Today, it was not so always, but the industry has been fighting, and so it can fool people like Trump and others into believing that this is just a Chinese conspiracy to reduce the profitability of US business. There is no climate change, even though the planet is really serious problem. Similarly, the sugar industry, as has been discovered recently, in 70s and 80s there was massive rise in obesity and diabetes and heart attacks. All of this was due to sugar, which was the new component in the diet. Oil, grease, this has been used for ages. There is no change in that. But this research would have damaged the profits of the sugar industry. So instead, they discredited this research against sugar and they introduced an alternative research which said that oil, ghee, etc. is damaging. So now all of us believe that you shouldn't eat food which is too fatty, oily. Even asli ghee came into doubt. Our parents used to say asli ghee is very healthy, but we learned to believe that no, asli ghee is damaging. Now it turns out that all of this is nonsense. There is no oil and grease, and this is not harmful. It's the sugar which is harmful. So basically what this shows is how easy it is to capture our minds, to plant false ideas in it, and to make everybody believe these false ideas. Nobody worries too much about sugar, even though current research shows that sugar is really like white poison. I recently went on a diet because I was overweight, so it was a Atkins diet, and the only thing it does is that it goes to zero sugar. It was very difficult to do, but very quickly I lost 20 pounds, and so now I'm fit. But it was difficult to do because sugar is in everything. So it's very effective. Just go to zero sugar and you can. But none of you need that. You're all slim. So anyway, the point is that the economic theory is just a piece of propaganda. It has no objective status at all. Very amazing. How you can deceive. Normal. Thank you. How you can deceive so many? How can cause mass hallucination? So everybody believes that economics theory is like rocket science. Why? Because they have such difficult mathematics. So basically the top 1% use the economic theory to hide the role of money, capitalist, land, wealth, speculation. All of these things are not part of the economic theory, because if you look at it, you will see that there is a problem. So in the early economic theory, land was a separate factor of production, and machines were separate, and there is a big difference between the two. But people used to talk about Henry George came up with a proposal that the land is not the rentier income. The people who are earning money from land, they are not providing any useful service to society. It's just the land which is doing so. And if we take their income and we tax it, there will be no adverse consequence to society. As opposed to this, if we tax industry, then people will be hurt, they will make less profits. So he proposed that all the tax should be on fixed assets which are, this became extremely popular. So to counterattack this, the economists disappeared the land from economic theory. So basically, this is just one example. There are many other examples like this. And people who used to accuse speculators that you are by bidding on land and by buying up stocks, you are causing the stock prices to increase. This is speculation. This is harmful because there is no real change in the value of the underlying asset. So now they said, they wanted to counteract. So now this speculation word this bubble, these are not part of economic theory. And instead what you say is wealth creation. If I speculate in stocks and I cause the price of stock to double, I have created wealth. Completely ridiculous idea, but this is the common accepted terminology. Why? This is also part of 81%. How to deceive the people into thinking something which is bad is actually good. So, I've talked about the 81% and the 80-90%. Actually, the 89% play a very important role in this whole process. The 1% by themselves, the 50 or 100 people, I don't know how many they are, who are running the world, they are too small, too few to run the whole world. So they rely on this middle cadre. These are the people who are millionaires, not billionaires, and they get the money from the billionaires in order to run the world on their behalf. So the 9%, they are the middle class, and they are in charge of exploiting the rich. They are in charge of, these are the guardians of the economic theory. And basically the system works in a very simple way. Everybody who is ambitious, who is bright, who is intelligent, they say, look, you have two choices. Either you can be part of the 90%, in which case you will be hungry and you will have low salary and you will struggle, or you can join us. If you join us, you will get lots of perks, you will make millions, but you have to have this theory. You have to believe in our ideology, you have to believe in capitalism, you have to propagate it. So all of the rich people, they have been purchased, and all of us are in the market to be purchased. If the multinational comes and says, okay, I give you a job, so the only thing you have to do is to propagate our theory. So the middle 9% play a very important role. If they sell out to the top, then they can be rewarded for their betrayal of the interest of the 90%. So now the private property is another idea in which, you see, again, the Islamic economists were deceived. They looked at communism and they say, oh, communism has common ownership of state ownership of capital, and capitalism has private property, and Islam has private property, so Islam is like capitalism. This is completely false. The private property of capitalism is very different from the private property of Islam. Now in capitalism, the capitalist has absolute rights to private property. They can do whatever they like with it. Islam, property is a trust. Actually, it temporarily belongs to me. It is given to me as an amanah by Allah. I have to use it properly, and it is not going to belong to me forever. It has to be passed down to the next generation, so I cannot dispose of it any way I like. So this idea of absolute property, this is what is leading to the massive environmental damage we see. Once I own something, I can do whatever I like with it. I can destroy it. I don't have to worry about the next generation. So this is one difference. Another difference is that in Islam, natural resources like the oceans, the atmosphere, forests, streams, these are the gifts of God to the entire mankind. You cannot own them as private property. Even, the deposits of oil, etc., these cannot be private property. These cannot be owned by private organizations for their private profit. They have to be used, we can give them to private, but the benefits should be shared with the all public, because it is a trust for the entire humanity, because it's a gift of God to the entire humanity. Failure to observe this principle in capitalism is a source of major damage. Now, the utility maximization, which is at the heart of economic theory, we have to understand the roots of this. So this was invented by Jeremy Bentham, who was an English philosopher, explicitly as an antidote to Christianity. He wanted to invent a new religion. So he said, okay, Christianity is completely wrong and bad. So now, what will the new religion be? Well, in order to introduce a new religion, you have to have some principles, what is good and what is bad, because that's what religion does. It's a normative framework. So how can we make new norms if we get rid of religion? So he said that there is two great principles. There is the pleasure and the pain. This is what tells us what is good and bad. If something feels good, then it is moral, it is right. And if something gives me pain, then it is wrong, it's bad, it's harmful. So this is the new morality. According to Quran says that, have you seen those people who worship their nafs, who have taken their nafs as God? So this is exactly the religion of Jeremy Bentham. That whatever your nafs likes, that is moral. Whatever your nafs doesn't like, that is immoral. So actually it's haram for a Muslim to teach this religion. But Muslims don't realize. The second generation has been arguing many articles that utility maximization is exactly Islamic. Everybody looks after his own welfare. So that's utility theory. Now, the fact is that utility maximization is wrong both as a normative theory and also as a empirically, a positive theory. It is not true that people maximize their welfare. You can find everybody will actually sacrifice and for others. And actually it has been proven that human beings are inherently social. People get pleasure out of helping others. You will get, and if you have 10,000 rupees, you can go and have a meal at Serena and you will get a stomachache. But if you have 10,000 rupees and you remain hungry, you fast and you spend it to feed poor children, you will get a pleasant memory which will last you for your whole life. So human beings are intrinsically generous. They like to help others even at cost to themselves. But so as a positive theory, this is wrong. As a normative theory, it's also wrong, that the idea that you just go after maximizing pleasure, will it make you happy? No, it doesn't. And empirically it can be proven that people who are greedy and they just look after their own and they don't care about others, they are very unhappy people. Because happiness is not caused by eating food, it's caused by loving others and by being loved. This is the most important component of happiness. So if you act greedily, selfishly, people will hate you. And even if they don't say anything, the feeling in their heart will damage you, will cause you pain, even if you are not aware of it. So the behavior that is taught to be rational by economists of maximizing the pleasure you get from consumption is highly irrational behavior. I think Amartya Sen wrote an article called Irrational Fools, which says that rational behavior is actually very foolish. So now that is the 7 fundamental errors. Now we say, okay, what is the alternative? What does Islam teach us to do? So I have given 3 methodological principles. This is just a start. There are many, hundreds of places where we can show that there are radical differences. But to organize things, let's look at 3 big things. So the first thing, see, every science which deals with human behavior, we have to understand human behavior. Now, economic theory, and in fact all of Western social science, is unable to understand human behavior because they believe that human beings don't have any heart and they don't have any soul. No spirit and no heart. They're only head. So they have often in their philosophy they talk about brains being suspended in vats of fluid. So that's actually, you see, you think about Pascal, I think therefore I am. This is a man who doesn't have a heart. You see, I know I am because I feel my heart beating. So that is, and I may not always be thinking, but I can always feel my heart beating. I can feel the blood rushing through my veins. I can feel tingling sensation in my skin, and that's why I know I'm alive. It's not because I'm thinking 2 plus 2 equals 4 and so I'm alive. But the West, it's all brains, no heart, no feelings. So, if you want to understand human beings, how should we start? Well, you have to study your own self. I mean, that's the best specimen. This is prohibited in economics. You're not supposed to use introspection. That's why you can do such stupid theories about human behavior, because you're not allowed to think about yourself. Otherwise, immediately, as soon as you start thinking, do I maximize my utility function? Then you will immediately say, no, this is false. So you're not allowed to think about yourself. Now, the first place to start to study human behavior is to study who you are, what you do. And Islam teaches us that. So, there is a hadith, Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa arafa rabbahu, that whoever knows himself, he knows his Lord. So we are supposed to study ourselves, because in our nafs, Allah Ta'ala has created the signs which will lead to the understanding of Him. You see, our desire for justice. We know, suppose I was talking to an atheist. I will ask, do you think that if somebody has killed 1,000 people and does unjust, do you think that this will have some consequence, this will have some effect? Do you think this is a bad thing? Yes, everybody will say this is a bad thing. Do you think that there should be justice somehow? Somehow this should be, the people who were wronged, they should be. Yes, everybody has this feeling that it should be. The person who has done wrong, he should be punished. The person who has done something good. So how will this happen? Well, that he doesn't know, because he doesn't know about afterlife. But this feeling, where did this feeling come from? Why not that, when the stone hits another stone and cracks it, then you don't say this was injustice and because this is nature. Something bad will happen, good will happen. Nothing. But for human beings, there is this sense that justice should be done. This is a pointer towards the existence of God. If you are in pain, difficulty, and trouble, you automatically, even atheists, cry out to God that please help me, and Allah Ta'ala answers them. So the signs of God are built into our nafs. So that's why the economists block access. And in fact, social science also, in the West, it developed by blocking access to your heart, to your intuition, to your emotions, to your spirit. So, in the Quran it says that every soul knows what it has done. We know the right from the wrong. We have been shown the two highways. So, the Quran says that be mindful of God, pay attention to what your heart is telling you. Your heart tells you this is right and this is wrong, and we know that. Even if you're doing something wrong, even though if it is going to bring you a lot of profits, if you're paying a bribe, your heart says that this is something wrong you're doing, but you learn to ignore that after a while if you keep doing bad things, because your heart becomes dark and it cannot then recognize the truth if you keep doing bad things. So, Islam teaches us that useful knowledge is that which enters the heart, not the brain. So, we have to, even knowledge of economics is a knowledge of the heart. That's how Islamic economics will be very different from any Western idea of economics. Now, in the Quran, as opposed to the teaching of the economists say that, any desire that exists, they are all equal, and we should fulfill their desire. Islam says no. There is justified desire, which is your basic needs, that you are perfectly kulu washrabu wala tusrifu. This very simple ayat explains exactly that. You eat and drink, wear beautiful clothes, even in some other place. So all of our jaiz desires are perfectly permissible and allowed, and in fact it's encouraged that you should try to fulfill the legitimate needs of yourself, your family, anybody who is needy. But وَلَا تُسْرِفُ, don't waste. So the ideal desires, also in other places, that if there is something whimsical, something that is not, I want to blow up firecrackers and get pleasure from burning money, that is not permissible. So, and that will lead to Jahannam. So it's strongly prohibited. So, unlike economists who say that all desires are the same, wants and needs are the same, Islam distinguishes very sharply between legitimate needs and illegitimate needs. So, according to economic theory, if the millionaire wants a recreational plane and a hungry child wants bread, these two are on par. It's the same kind of thing. Somebody wants to listen to music, that desire is on par with somebody who wants to get treatment for health. These are both desires, and whoever has more money, that is the demand that will be fulfilled. But Islam says that no, those kinds of desires are not legitimate and not on par with the basic needs desires. So this is again contrary to the central message of economics. The scarcity is generated by treating needs and wants as the same. So wants are unlimited, but needs are not. As Gandhi said that there is enough for everybody's need, but not enough for everybody's greed. So if we think about how to fulfill the needs of everybody on the planet, there is plenty of resources to do that. But so there is no scarcity. But if we think about how to fulfill the greed of everybody, then there is no limit. So the really amazing thing is that what I am teaching you is not rocket science. It's not, advanced mathematics, which is very difficult to understand. It's very easy to understand. So how is it that the economists have deluded themselves and deluded huge numbers of people? I mean, if you take this message and you go to the Qaid-e-Azam University, you will have difficult time persuading other people, even though it's very simple. I'm not teaching very complicated things. I'm teaching very simple things. But people have been brainwashed into believing the opposite. So how did they do that? Well, this is this ayat that do not be like those who have forgotten God. So God made them forget their own selves. So this is actually one of the things that the economists don't even look at their own inside them what is contained. I mean, everybody behaves emotionally, but the economists say no, we only care about money, and they delude themselves. There was a very interesting experiment which was conducted about giving students an opportunity to cheat. They were given exams and they had to write answers, and they were scored and they were given rewards. So it turned out that the experimenter was trying to find out that if you increase monetary incentives, will people cheat more? It turned out that it didn't work. I mean, the changes in monetary incentives did not lead to increase in cheating. There was basically the explanation that was given was that when you cheat, you're actually violating a strong notional norm. Yes, if there was huge amount of money, but an experimental amount going from $1 to $2, you don't want to cheat for a small amount of money. There's the basic honesty code in that experiment. So, however, when students were asked what will happen, everybody predicted that yes, if you offer monetary incentives, people will cheat. So basically, we all believe that we are all driven by money, even though we ourselves are not actually driven by money. And this is the same is true in labor theory. The labor theory of wages says that if you want to motivate workers, you punish them if they are underperforming by cutting their pay, and you reward them when they make achievements. But actual motivation theory shows that if you take a person and say, look, I trust you, I need you to do this job for me, and here's $1,000 extra for you, and please do it, they will do it. And on the other hand, if you monitor and shirk and punish, then they will get involved in this game that, okay, he's looking at my key performance indicators, I have to produce 1,000 goods. Okay, so let me produce 1,000 goods, all of them will be defective, and I will do it quickly, and he will not be able to find out, and I will make money. So when it's for money, then you get a different kind of behavior, and when it's for loyalty, it's a different kind of behavior. And people respond more to trust and loyalty than they do to monetary rewards and punishment, which is showing actually distrust. So this is what it says, that if you look at your own heart, you will immediately understand the truth of this. But if you look at the mathematics, you will be convinced of the opposite of the truth. So this is what the ayat says, that those people who disbelieve, Allah Ta'ala, the shayateen lead him from light into darkness. And those who have iman, those who trust their hearts, they are led from the darkness into light. So now, what Quran teaches us and what our own internal examination will teach us is that human behavior is very complex. It cannot be reduced to a mathematical formula. The key is actually the why we were created is that our heart is a battleground between the good and the evil. So at all times, the greatest saint is also subject to temptation, and the biggest sinner has the possibility of doing good. So Allah Ta'ala says in many places, Hadainahum Najdain, we have shown him the two highways of the good and evil, and we have left him free to choose. Let whoever wants to, let him choose a path to his Lord. So it's up to us. If we want to do that, if we want to do good, we can do good. If we want to do bad, we can do bad. So the Western question is, are people, you see, once the behavioral scientists started studying human behavior, they saw that some human people are generous, some are selfish, and sometimes people are both, so they can't understand it. So the question is, are people generous or are people selfish? So the answer is that both tendencies are simultaneously present in every single human being. It's not that some people are saints and they will always act generously, some people are selfish and they will all. No. Both and depending on the environment, you can create people, and in fact, one of the things that is, and so people have started studying this. So if a selfish person is placed in an environment where everybody is behaving generously, he will tend to behave generously. He will be ashamed of this behavior. And if you put a generous person where everybody is being selfishly, he will also start behaving selfishly because he sees that there is no recognition or reward. So, Islam doesn't teach us to observe behavior. It is not like, a positive sign. It says that how can we change people? How can we take selfish people and make them generous? This is the key point of Islam, which is very different from, according to the Western theory, we are scientists, we just observe. Some person is dying from hunger, we write down his symptoms. We don't give him food. So, Islam is about changing things. Alright, so we know that people have selfish tendencies. We know that people want to maximize utility, but we also know that this is not good for them. So now how do we act ourselves to change our own selves, to create an inner revolution inside our own heart, and how do we act to change others? That was the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, and he succeeded in the sense that these Arabs, they were very selfish. They were fighting each other for small things. They were burying their daughters alive. But by the time the Prophet ﷺ completed his training, they became Yani people that Allah Ta'ala mentions their property in the Quran, that these people feed others out of the love of Allah, even while they are themselves hungry. So the Quran says this about the Sahaba. So we don't, that's why I have to mention the Quran, because if I say that this is something that is mentioned in history, people will say, no, this cannot happen. Because according to the way of thinking that we have learned, everyone is selfish. So it's not possible for someone to feed another person if he is himself hungry. The first, at least, he will feed himself, then he will think about others. So the question is, in Islamic question, is not, is neither descriptive nor prescriptive. It's not positive, it's not normative. Actually, it's both. First, we describe what people are doing. Then we look at the normative idea of what they should be doing. Then we look at the transformative idea, how we can get from here to there. So it has positive element, it has normative element, and it has transformative element. So it has three parts, as opposed to economic theory, which claims to be positive but is normative. So Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran that whoever is saved from the selfishness of their own souls, it is they who are truly successful. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. Those who purify their heart of the greed. So this is a very different message from the economic theory. And this is directly opposite to the message of economics, that whoever fulfills his desire, he is the one who is successful. So, what are the ways? Well, Islam is full of teachings in this direction. We should have to avoid israf, tabzir, give to others, learn to live simply, lower our standards of living, not higher, not raise. And those who follow their ideal desires, they will perish. Do not maximize your utility. Instead, Allah Ta'ala says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. Whatever you like the most, give it to the others. This will hurt you. This will hurt your nafs. And this will be training for your nafs. So, you see, there is a technical point, a delicacy, a fine point, that Allah Ta'ala doesn't say that look at the need of the other person and give him what he needs the most. That is the more logical, rational thing to do. But the giving to the others is not meant for the others. It's meant for your training. It will also have a beneficial effect. That's not the primary purpose. So take the thing that you love the most and give that. That will be the best training for you. We're not looking at what's best for the other person. So, the first thing that we need to do for our own inner self-transformation is to purify our niyat. Innamal amal bin niyat. So you see, economists also starts with this niyat. It says, but it automatically assumes, because basically, you see, if you look at the justification for utility maximization in Mankiv, he says, everybody has a goal and they are striving to achieve that goal. That is where maximization comes from. Every human being is driven by the purpose. But what is that purpose? It's maximization of pleasure of utility, assumed without any examination. Is that really true? Is that really good for us? Islam says, no, that's a bad purpose. To make your purpose good. And so what is the purpose? My worship and my sacrifice and my living and my dying are for the sake of Allah Rabbul Alameen. Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mati lillahi Rabbil Alameen. Man and jinn, ma khalaqtal jinna wal insa illa liya'budun. So the purification starts, the tazkiyah of our heart. Heart is full with desires of bad things, of things which are sinful, things which are harmful to us, things which are harmful to others. So the task of Islam, first level, is to purify our own hearts. Then, so everything we do should be worship. So how can we turn the study of economics into worship? I am here teaching and you are here studying. This should be an act of worship. So if we make it in Islamic economics that we are trying to learn how we can bring the orders of Allah, how we can carry out the order of Allah in the economic realm, in my life and in my family, in my community, then this is an act of worship. Of course, there's nothing different. So I start by asking my students to become anti-economists Instead of maximizing their pleasure, they are going to maximize the service that they do for humanity. I am not created for myself. Everything that I have, my needs will be, you see, if I'm working for the sake of Allah, if all my actions are for the sake of Allah Rabbul Alameen, then I don't need to worry about eating and drinking. Really, this is, and people say first that so devote your life to the service of the creation of Allah for the sake of the love of Allah. And I guarantee you that you don't have to worry about eating and drinking. Once you are a soldier in the Fawj of Allah, then He will give you the uniform and the food. And Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, He has promised that those who have taqwa, we will feed them from where they cannot see, and we will find a way out of problems that they cannot understand. So this is the promise of Allah. So if we say that, okay, my life is solely for Allah, and I will do only the things that Allah Ta'ala wants me to do, I won't worry about how I am going to eat, and I won't worry about how I am going to drink. Then Allah Ta'ala says, if you do that, ash-shaytanu ya'idukum al-faqr. Shaitan will try to scare you. Oh, if you do that, you will become poor, you will starve, your family will starve. But don't fear shaitan, fear me. And if you are, so basically, we in economics, the love of wealth is a poison. So we seek tazkiyah. We want to reduce the love of mal, and this is what Islamic economics is about. How to purify our heart from the love of wealth. So obviously this has nothing to do with modern economic theory, and unfortunately the second generation of Islamic economists sought to make these two things the same, and so obviously they couldn't make any progress. So this is what third generation Islamic economics is about, is to start Islamic economics from Quran and Hadith instead of Samuelson. So there are 3 stages of spiritual progress. The first stage is Nafs Ammara, which is Western economics. Ammara means commanding, the one who commands. So this is exactly Jeremy Bentham. Your nafs is in control of your life. Whatever you want, you do. And this is how most of us live. That at this time, if I have a choice, a decision in front of me, I will choose the decision which maximizes the pleasure that I get. This is economic theory, this is game theory, this is everything that the West teaches us. So, Nafsul Lawwama is like the second generation economics. It says that, well, yes, people actually do that, but we should think about what Allah Ta'ala wants us to do also. So they're trying to modify. And the Nafs Mutmanna is the third generation. Actually, you do what Allah Ta'ala wants you to do. You don't do what your nafs wants you to do. So now you reject the Western theory and you follow the order of Allah instead of following the desire of your nafs. So in all of the areas then, we have radically different theories. The micro theory of Islam is completely different from the micro theory of Samuelson. The meso theory doesn't exist, but in Islam we have a very strong theory of community. In fact, basically you cannot achieve anything on your own. If you want to create change, you have to change the community in which you are living. So the meso-economic theory of Islam would be a very unique and radical contribution. And people are actually working on that. And in the blind economics who have they have realized that communities are very important. Actually, human welfare is very strongly tied. If you think about your happiness, then first of all, it's clear that happiness does not depend on how much you eat, the consumption theory. And so, if you go to second level, then human beings are social. If you just think about happiness, forget about akhirah, forget about qabr, then happiness depends on our social relationships. So our family matters extremely much, our community, our friends, our neighbors. These are the people who will, how good our relations are with them, that is what will determine our happiness. So building strong families, building strong communities, this is very much a part of Islam. And then macro, Islam offers a different insight. Nations divide us and they keep the wars that we see are because of this national interest. So we have to rise above. We have to look at the ummah. We have to look at humanity as a whole. The Prophet ﷺ, his heart was full of pain for humanity as a whole. Allah Ta'ala consoles him that will you kill yourself with sorrow if not all of the human beings, and this is talking now about kafirin, not the believers, if they don't listen to what you have to say, because then he will not be able to save them. So his heart was full of sorrow for all human beings. That is why he was called Rahmatul lil Alameen, not Rahmatul lil Muslimeen. So this feeling in our heart, our heart should also have the love of all human beings, not just today. In fact, there's a very strong misinterpretation of Islam, that Islam teaches us to love Muslims and to hate the kafirs. This is completely wrong. It has nothing to do with Islam. But unfortunately, today lots of even religious scholars are teaching hatred in the name of Islam, which is really very contrary to the spirit of Islam. There are so many examples of how the Prophet ﷺ returned love for hatred and returned good. And in the Quran also says that if somebody does bad to you, you do good to him and he will become your friend. So we are not taught to hate and we are not taught to kill and abuse others. But unfortunately today many people misunderstand Islam. So in every dimension, Islam creates revolutionary new pathways. And so Islamic economics, instead of conventional economics, is the